It's the Full Court Press with Eric Frandsen and Jason Walker.
Welcome back to the to the show that we're doing right now.
Following the local teams, breaking down the biggest games with in-depth analysis and team interviews.
There's going to be much higher expectations, sense of awareness of what we bring to the table.
Join the show by calling into 435-752-1069 or text 435-339-0321. It's the Full Court Press.
Throws, answer, yes! Caught! Touchdown! They did it!
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Eric Frandsen, Jason Walker here on the Full Court Press. Thanks for tuning in on a Tuesday. Happy New Year. Welcome on into another show, another year, right? Here on the Full Court Press. Trying to make sense of what's going on in the world of sports, both locally, regionally, nationally, things like that. I know that big topics today on the national networks, and deservedly so, for what happened Monday night in Monday Night Football in Cincinnati. But there are other things that are going on that we're going to focus on here on the fan, on the Full Court Press, at least during this hour, and a more local focus with what's on our minds, because there are several things that are happening. Utah State Aggies are in action tonight. Utah Jazz are in action tonight. We have high school basketball that gets underway, as we talked about this last hour, that's picking up again tomorrow, and several games throughout this week. But, a couple other things that we want to get through here on the show. But again, we're certainly are mindful of what's going on with the Bills fans and the Bengals fans with everything that happened last night. But one of the things that kind of happened today, another big event that happened today, Jason, was there's this transformation committee has been together looking at ways to transform or improve or change the NCAA. And it was for the Division I, and there's been some blowback on this, apparently. There's this committee that got together and had their ideas. And rather than before, they put their ideas together about how to improve the future of the NCAA, but before giving it to their board of directors, who ultimately has to approve it, they went straight to the media, which is kind of interesting, that they bypassed their board of directors and went straight to the media with their proposals. But one of the things that kind of stands out with this new proposal about transforming or improving or expanding the NCAA is about postseason play. And one of the recommendations is that if there is a sport that consists of more than 200 institutions, they should try to implement a postseason that includes 25% of the teams that meet the D1 standard in that sport. So for basketball, which has, over 360 teams participating, if you're going to have 25% of the teams participate in your postseason, Jason, that could be up to 90 teams for for March Madness.
Yeah, it's nuts. And I'll tell you what, though. You know which other sport has more than 200 Division I participants? Football.
It does?
FBS and FCS are both Division I.
I
mean, I don't think that ends up counting because they probably see them as separate.
Yes.
But there's 200, according to Wikipedia, it tells me. There's only 131 FBS teams and about as many FCS teams. So Wikipedia is telling me 257. Well, I think the math might be slightly off there, which is a lot. But other, basketball there in the 360s, baseball and soccer, men's baseball and soccer are both north of 200. So that's a lot.
That's greatly expanding postseason participation.
Yeah. And I don't know how large their postseasons are. I know the College World Series is a pretty it's a well-known event. Like, people are obviously aware of it and usually gets a lot of TV coverage. It's usually the only part of the college baseball season anyone pays attention to.
True.
There's other looking at the other, the women's team sports, there's, 4 different sports that could be effective for them: basketball, soccer, volleyball, and softball. All of them have, 3 of those have at least 300 teams. Softball has almost 300 teams at 293. Again, this according to Wikipedia. I don't know if the numbers are exactly right, but I'm sure they're ballpark accurate. So, no, I don't know how big the playoffs are for each of these sports. Now, we were just going over volleyball, and I think that was only like 32 or so teams. I can't remember. Of course, and the problem with that is that they only give seedings to like the top 16 teams. So Utah State was an unseeded team playing a 6th seed. But I think it was only 32 teams, so that could see some expansion there. I don't know if they're doing this with the intent to increase college basketball's, March Madness. I really hope they
sure
don't.
Hope not.
It's already big enough, and you can argue it's already too big. It's fine. I don't really care. If you really wanted to argue, is it too big or too small? The answer is it's too big, but nobody cares because we all like it. If you make it bigger, that's when it's, okay, this is getting a little ridiculous.
Right. It just would further devalue the regular season, the more teams that you start letting in. And logistically, look, I'm all for great basketball and seeing the little guy go up against a powerhouse or somebody from a bigger conference. And give them a chance to win those games. And yes, invariably there are good teams that get left out of the field of 68. But you keep moving the goalposts, and there's going to be a good team that's left out. And it just you have to have a standard and a qualification to get those teams in and to qualify. And look, I think it's working great at 68. I don't think we need to expand it anymore. I know there's a lot of folks that say, look, if you win your regular season, you get a first-round bye or something like that. You take your regular season champs and your tournament champs. That's how you start to set your field, and then you can do your at-larges from there. But, look, it's not that controversial. That's part of the excitement of the tournament is who gets in and why. And, yeah, there's maybe some – Aggies have felt this. This hits close to home. Aggies have felt this where they got left out before. But, look, it's at 68. It's working great. Let's just – if we want to expand the soccer postseason or the volleyball or softball, great. That's fine. And I look at one of the lines here from the statement of the release – the statement that was released from co-chairs Julie Cromer and Greg Sankey. And they said, ultimately, we want as many student athletes as possible to start each season with Division I national championship dreams. Okay, yeah, that's great. We want everybody to think they have a chance. But, I mean, come on. I mean, let's be reasonable with how many teams are getting through and just logistically and the expense of how it's done. And really all this does, when you look at it, is open up more opportunities for power conferences to send more of their teams to earn more money. It doesn't really open more doors for the smaller or mid-range schools like they would try to let us believe.
Yeah, that is the main problem, is that I'm not so much concerned. And you brought up the devaluing the regular season. I don't necessarily care about that argument one way or the other. For me, it really is this, okay, what would the purpose of expanding, we can use the March Madness as an example, what's the purpose of expanding that? To me, the number one purpose would be to allow other teams in like one-bid conferences to actually have a chance outside of winning 3 straight games in early March. That's why, saying like, all right, win the regular season or the conference tournament. I kind of dislike the auto bid being tied to the conference tournament. It's not a deal breaker. I don't hate it. I just don't like it. I'd like to see the regular season champion be rewarded for being the regular season champion. They earned it over 30-ish games, and over 18 to 20 conference games.
Right. Be tied to your overall body of work, not just a few days on a neutral court.
Yeah. And so, if you wanted to expand the tournament to, 75-ish, I've got to have an even number, so whatever number would work, if you expanded it slightly, and then added every regular season conference winner and conference tournament winner, I could be okay with that. I wouldn't like it. I'd prefer you just stayed at 68 and did that. But I could live with it.
Because there's going to be cases where whomever wins the regular season could also win the tournament. That happens. But there are a good number of cases where that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and that's where, in these one-bid leagues, you have the one team that maybe they go 18-0 in conference play, and then they lose a random game in the conference tournament, and they're done. That's not fair to them. They're a team that deserves to be in the tournament, and they're getting robbed of that because just bias against the conference. You automatically do not get in because of your conference. And that's not the way it is. And so you kind of alluded to this. Part of the thing with expansion, you say, oh, we get all those teams in. No, you wouldn't. All the one-bid leagues, they'd stay one-bid leagues. You might add maybe one or two of them becomes a two-bid league. But basically every one-bid league stays that way. Guaranteed.
Right, you just end up sending more Big 12 teams
Yeah.
and more SEC teams and more Big 10 teams.
Yeah, that's what it would be. You'd be sending...
Because your argument would be, well, look at their regular competition through the regular season.
Yeah.
They're a better team.
Yeah, you'd be using the same arguments and all that crap, and nothing would change save you send more, major conference teams. So the whole reason for expansion would be to get more one-bid league teams in, and also you'd maybe raise with the Mountain West a little bit, where it becomes two-bid league, sometimes at best 4 or 5. They could get 5 or 6 in a good year. And, it buoy them up. And the Mountain West probably would. They'd be one of the conferences that would benefit from expansion.
They probably would.
Because you would get more SEC and more all that, but the Mountain West would get more too. So, Mountain West, I'd love to see more teams because it would benefit the Mountain West. But for me, even from a Utah State Mountain West perspective, I say the point of expansion should be to help one-bid leagues, and it wouldn't the way it's currently set up. So there's no reason to expand. Other than the obvious, they just want more money. So that's why some of these teams want to expand. Which, sure, but don't be... At least just admit it and don't say, oh, we're doing this for the little guy. No, you're not.
No, you're not.
We're doing this for the little guy, says the SEC commissioner, as he gets 5 more teams into the tournament.
So it was more... The recommendations here are more than just about postseason access. Some of the things that they discussed was that there would be... they would create sports-specific management committees, which I actually like, because then if there's an issue with that particular sport, that committee that's focused on that sport can make a decision or adopt guidelines, and things can happen a lot quicker rather than going through all the bureaucracy, going all the way up to the top, feeding its way down through other committees, working its way back down. It just takes it's a longer process. So if you have people that are focused on that particular sport, it can help move things along more quickly. And so I applaud that recommendation.
Yeah, that's fine. And when you're running leagues like this, and as you get further and further, and sports are getting bigger and bigger, you got to adjust. You got to adjust the bureaucracy. Adjust all these things, and it's just one of those things. And it's necessary maintenance.
Right.
That's how it is.
Technology changes, as interpretation of rules changes, as new teams or new playoff formats, then this sport-specific committee can get together and make those decisions rather than going through the full NCAA bureaucracy moving things along. One of the other things, too, which is kind of cool, is that they've recommended a new requirement that all Division I schools provide medical coverage for athletics-related injuries for a minimum of 2 years following graduation or completion of athletics experience. So it would be what they call a more holistic athlete benefits model that they're trying to approach, and also pay for athletes who are on full scholarships to get their degrees within 10 years of leaving school. So a couple other things that are better for athlete welfare that I think that's solid. I approve that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my money, so I don't care. And obviously, you'll like to see them looking after the athletes. especially getting degrees and also medical care, because a lot of these athletes can suffer life-altering injuries. You might tear your ACL in college. You might get back to the field, but down the line, granted it's only 2 years out, but down the line that can still hurt.
Right, and there's a consideration here where if you get injured while participating in a sport, then you graduate and you technically leave campus, you leave the umbrella of everything that the institution takes care of, then you're on your own for your own rehab and follow-up, and if there have to be other surgeries or procedures done, that can really be expensive.
And to be honest, I think I would consider extending that, if I was in charge, at least think about, extending that 2 years to, the 10 years. You're trying to help them get their degree 10 years later. And I can understand why up to 10 years, because sometimes for some players, a couple years after they've left, sometimes they're focusing on like professional or other things. Like they're not looking to get their degree. They left school early to go be a professional athlete maybe. So you got to give them some time to get back. Okay, now I can start my degree, because my, average pro careers don't last much more than 4 or 5 years. They get back, they go get a degree, enter the workforce. But medical-wise, I feel like there's a reason for that, because you talk about rehab and things like that. They can go on for your whole life, depending on the injury.
Oh, that's true. One other thing, too, that was kind of interesting is that there's been an attendance requirement for football where you need to average 15,000 fans per game once every 2 years to maintain FBS status. And it looks like that there's a recommendation to eliminate that. There's to have that disappear. So that could be interesting. I know that's Utah State used to be on that bubble. Certainly, there's concerns with Hawaii with their stadium situation, if they would meet that criteria. But there's some movement that says that really shouldn't be a requirement to be an FBS level school.
Yeah, and I've not really looked into what would make an FCS or FBS school, and I don't really haven't looked into the politics, because there's reasons you want to be an FBS school, and there's a lot of FCS teams that in some ways could make the jump to FBS, but there's a lot of behind the scenes, attendance being one of those, and a bunch of other financial reasons. The attendance, I'm not sure why you'd get rid of that, other than that, like I could understand suspending it for a little bit, because we did just go through COVID, and that was a mess, and attendance was jacked up for a lot of people. I imagine there were probably a lot of waivers from a lot of teams saying, hey, and the NCAA was like, yeah, we get it. Okay, let's move it along and get back to normal. I feel like there should probably be some requirement to show that, like, hey, we are an actual FBS team.
Right, so what if it's not that, then what is your minimum threshold? I mean, there has to be some floor about what do we accept as a baseline FBS participant?
Yeah.
And it's been tied to attendance. That's usually been the one thing to determine if you are an FBS level school or not. And now, to be clear, they're not saying that it should go away, but it should be examined if it should be required going forward. But basically, it's saying, like, do we really need this requirement? But if not that, then what? That would be my question. What else would you use as a determining factor if you are going to be an FBS school or not?
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to that question. I don't have an answer. What would be like I say? I'd think it should be attendance. Maybe you can get rid of it, but I wouldn't know what would replace it. You think like
relegation.
Yeah, just performance. That's the thing. Just tied to performance.
If you don't win a certain number of games in let's call it a 5-year span, because you should be able to make up your roster or change things, your coaches and everything. Maybe 5 years.
I don't know, just every year.
Not enough, I don't know. But if you can't perform, if you can't get an X number of wins in that amount of time, then why are you still in this level?
Yeah, I'd say, barring tying it to performance, there's not much else you can do. Because other than just tradition, I guess. Because there's a lot of schools that are traditionally FBS teams. Utah State's one of them. They've been FBS or whatever's been FBS their entire existence. So, like, other than that, like, what makes Utah State an FBS team? Other than they just have always been one. Ever since the NCAA, whenever the NCAA came out, you know.
I mean, part of the attendance does make sense. I mean, it's because it's in some way it's a sport that requires a lot of investment, of capital investment to make it work. And so you have to have, especially at this level. And so if you have to have a certain level of regular attendance in order to clear your bottom line to make that sport work at this level. And maybe that's where that 15,000 number came from, although that's been out there for years. So I'm sure that number could fluctuate and change. But maybe it's about that. I mean, if you're averaging 15,000 in your arena, then your athletic department is going to meet a certain level of financial ability to compete, travel, get your right equipment, training, things like that. So I don't know. I don't know where that magic number comes from and why that was originally set, but it's something that is going to be reevaluated.
Maybe you just tie it directly to, all right, how much money are you spending on your football program? If you're spending X amount of dollars in your football program, like Utah State for the last few years has been around $30 million-ish. I don't know if that's gone up. The last numbers I've checked are from like 2015, 2016.
That's total athletic budget.
Yeah, I guess that's total athletic. Football is, I think, like half that. Or, I forget what percentage of football actually makes up that whole thing, but it's a lot.
Probably a third.
Yeah.
At least.
They're one of the two sports that actually makes money with any regularity. So, yeah, just say, all right, this so football team, you spend X million dollars on it. That makes you Division I. Or if it's any other sport, you spend such and such $100,000, $1 million, whatnot on that program. Like, just say, all right, if you're an FBS team or Division I, this is how much you got to have an investment in it.
Yep, minimum level, and then it kind of like it escalates over. So there's a factor that grows over time. So it follows spending levels and trends.
And adjust for inflation and all that. So it's like...
Oh, maybe that's the key.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's worth examining. Like, why do we have this number, and should it be adjusted? And how many teams would be affected if that is adjusted in different ways? So anyway, some interesting stuff from the NCAA and the Transformation Committee with some of their recommendations. That were out. Certainly the biggest that's caught a lot of people's attention is the 25% of all participating schools could qualify for postseason, and for the NCAA men's basketball, that could expand it up to 90 participants if that were to be adopted.
So just going back, I looked up average attendance for college football. FBS, basically everyone hit minus like 10 teams meets the 15,000 threshold. A handful of Mountain West teams don't actually meet it, though. New Mexico's like barely under, like 14,966 barely under.
Ooh.
They were over it in 2021. They were at 16,000. But Nevada, 14,900, and Hawaii, as you mentioned, though they have a, There's a pretty big reason for that.
Yeah, that's true. All right, more to get into. We certainly want to talk more about the Mountain West. How about Utah State in the Mountain West Conference in hoops? Got off to a good start on New Year's Eve, taking on Air Force Academy tonight. What do we know about Air Force? And the Utah Jazz also in action, hosting the Sacramento Kings. A lot of close losses for the Jazz. Can they get back on track? We'll discuss that coming up next.
Old McDarrell has a farm and an appliance farm
with down-home country prices and big city selection.
E-I-E-I-O. When you're looking for a friendly spot to drive a little and save a lot, hey, Old McDarrell has a farm, an appliance farm. Darrell's Appliance. Low overhead, but lots of country charm. See Darrell's Appliance in beautiful downtown Benson.
Copiers, printers, service, and supplies are just the beginning. Les Olson IT is the premier source for your business's structured cabling, IT, software, telephones, and security systems. We partner with you to find the ideal solution to all of your office technology needs. Tell us your goals and we'll get you there. Find out more at lesolson.com.
Les Olson IT.
We're heading into some crazy weather this winter, which means power outages. Tyler and his team at Golden Spike Electric can install a Generac automatic standby generator for your home so you can avoid issues when the power goes out. If you have one already, Golden Spike Electric can maintain your Generac automatic standby generator for you. Find them online at gsegenerators.com or call 435-257-3016. Golden Spike Electric and Generac automatic standby generators. Power you can count on.
And now, the Dan Patrick Show.
Dan Patrick.
I don't think there's anybody who thought Patrick Mahomes doesn't have enough time to be able to go down and score and beat the Chargers.
That's how I felt.
No, and look, I just realized, there's just certain things where in sports you accept it.
The Dan Patrick Show.
Dan and the Danettes and you.
Weekday mornings from 7 to 10 on Sports Talk Radio, 106.9 FM, 1390 AM. The Fan. It's the Full Court Press. Weekday afternoons from 4 to 6 on Sports Talk Radio, 106.9 FM, 1390 AM. The Fan.
Welcome back. Hour 2 of the Full Court Press. Jason Walker here. We have deceived you because Eric Frandsen actually hasn't been here the last few minutes. We did pre-record some of the stuff. We're going to have another segment here where we talk about Utah State basketball. I am here in the meantime. I'm still in the studio. This is still live. Wanted to read some of your text, though. Obviously, a lot of reactions. Got a lot of texts in from you guys. Then we'll kick it over to back to me and Eric. To largely finish out the show. Had a few texts came in towards the end of the last hour. 6543. So sorry for not reading out your text. Probably we're like 45 minutes after you sent it. They asked, please comment on the names that have appeared in the transfer portal. For those of you who don't know, I was actually in the process while that segment was playing with me and Eric, was in the process of updating the transfer portal tracker that we have on CashValleyDaily.com. There's a new name that's in the portal, Brian Phillips reporting it, and then Arian Peoples. That's the name. He's a defensive tackle. He basically confirmed it on his own Twitter page. So he's in the transfer portal. So, there's a lot of guys right now that are, there are backups who are looking for more opportunity. And then there's some who, there's some who want to. There's some who are trying to move up. Daniel Grishik, Byron Vaughns. Those are two guys who are getting numerous P5 offers. Byron Vaughns getting wooed by the Pac-12, even Notre Dame. Daniel Grishik, who's getting offers from Houston, Indiana, Missouri, Cincinnati. Waylon Lapuaho going to BYU. So there's some big names in there, and it's going to hurt. And the defensive line, there's like this mass exodus from the defensive line. And it kind of makes you wonder what's going on there. But, the transfer portal is really mean to Utah State on the first day, though. It's calmed down a little bit. We'll see how things going, though. 2603 says we need to keep it. We were talking earlier about, expansion of playoffs. Said we need to keep it at 68 teams. This is for men's college basketball. And award the regular season champions and the conference champions if they are separate with automatic bids. And I kind of agree with that, where I said, I could probably live with 70-something teams if, a very light expansion, then, yeah, if it was to reward regular season champions, if you were that has to go with it. If you expand it at all without any, help of one-bid leagues, then it just can't do it. It's already too big, and as I said in the segment, I don't care that it's too big because I like it, but if it gets bigger, then it becomes a problem, and then it becomes bloated. You can already make the argument that it's bloated, but we're fine. Don't expand it and make it a problem when you don't need to. Got a few texts in from 9315. Says, if there was like 80 or so in men's basketball, would that mean teams with losing records would make the tournament? And yeah, I think it would. Like, it probably wouldn't happen every year, but you'd have teams with losing records that would make it in. It's actually already happened. Teams with losing records have made the tournament, but it's generally been pretty rare. And most of them won their conference tournament. But there would potentially be at-large teams making the tournament. If you're getting into the 80s and 90s of number of teams, you would be looking at teams getting at-large bids with losing records. 9315 also saying, just think if they attach that stuff when you graduate to the transfer portal, and then saying the last school you transfer to foots the bill. I think talking about medical bills and things like that. We're talking about NCAA trying to improve quality of life in terms of helping people get their education, also extending medical coverage just slightly beyond when you leave. 7994 says, performance, Vanderbilt? I don't think so. Money, Vanderbilt? Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Talking about, I was referencing, getting more SEC teams in. Into the tournament, more major conference teams into the tournament. It's like, yeah. Some teams don't deserve it based off performance, but, money-wise. 9310, not to be confused with 9315, says the expanding of benefits of college athletes lays the burden on cost of the average student. I'm not sure privileges need to be expanded for the few athletes at the cost of an average student. I'll be honest, I had not thought of that, and I feel like that's actually a good argument. Because I have in the past not liked the amount of privileges that college athletes get, but we do need to understand that they're making a lot of money off the backs of these athletes. And I do understand that cost is going to go on the average student. The average student foots way too much of the athletics budget bill. So there is a question of, all right, who are we being fair to? Are we being fair to the students at the university or fair to the athletes? Because unfortunately, this is a true statement. 9310 is right here, at least in terms of where the cost is going. So the question is, who are we being fair to? Because we can't really do both. And obviously, when talking about it in the moment, obviously we went straight to let's be fair to the athletes. But there is some consideration that has to be laid that there are other people paying for it, who aren't reaping any of the benefits that the athletes or the university is getting. So that is a fair point from 9310, and I'm glad you brought that up. 8968 with a couple of texts. Saying, I asked, even pleaded, and even begged, and so far the heavens haven't heard me because I still can't get a decent station to listen to the Aggie games on. I'm sorry. That's a clever text, going off of our little commercial there in intro. He also texted in saying the Aggies were a victim of being in a one-bid league. One of Stu Morrill's teams won the Big West hands down, but lost to a Cal Davis who basically sandbagged the whole season when suddenly just before the tournament about 6 or 7 players became eligible. Yeah, and there was, I don't know if that was the same year that the Aggies were ranked in the top 25 and didn't make it in because they were in the one bid, they were in the WAC and they were in the Big West. I don't know which conference they were in when they were ranked and didn't make it in. It was either the Big West or the WAC. But yeah, the Aggies, that's part of why I have the sympathy for one bid leagues. Like, there's these teams, and the Aggies were one of them. They're not anymore. They're in a conference where they can get at-large bids, realistically. But they didn't used to, and it hurt them. There are a couple, times the Aggies should have got in. 6800. Sorry if I missed it, but did we already cover Donovan Mitchell's 71 last night? We actually didn't. We'll probably talk about that a bit tomorrow. We're actually this next segment we're going to play that we got to rush into has to do with the Utah State against Air Force. So we're going to cut to break. When we come back, we'll get into that, and then we'll close up shop after that. So we'll have more after this on 106.9 The Fan.
Elements has delicious lunch specials, 2 for $30, or the new soup, salad, and bread special for just $10. It's tasty and quick. Elements' lunch menu is full of scrumptious items prepared with a personal touch. Wood-fired pizzas are an excellent choice that include barbecue chicken and the bee's knees. The fresh battered halibut fish and chips with seasoned fries is always a hit. And don't forget the fan favorite Munster burger. Casual or professional. Open Monday through Thursday, 11:30 to 8 p.m. and Friday and Saturday, 11:30 to 9 p.m. Visit theelementsrestaurant.com for reservations today.
It's that first kiss, that moment in time.
It's that look in her eye when you get the first sign.
We make it personal, you know when it's real.
Something for everyone, we know how you feel. Jared's fine jewelry, make it special, make it Jared's.
It's never too late or too cold to get rid of that old vehicle. Now is the time to earn extra cash by calling DD Auto and Salvage. Let them pay you for that junk vehicle. DD Auto and Salvage makes it so easy and fast to get rid of your junker vehicles by paying you the most money possible. Pickup is available. If you have metal, DD Auto and Salvage in Logan wants to pay you today. Call 787-1204.
That's 787-1204 today.
See store for details.
Breaking down the biggest games with in-depth analysis and team interviews. It's the Full Court Press with Eric Frandsen and Jason Walker.
Welcome back to the Full Court Press. Eric Frandsen, Jason Walker, and let's shift gears here. Talking about Utah State Aggies. They're in action tonight. Pre-game coverage for KVNU game day will start at 6 on 102 FM, 610 AM, and tip-off will be at 7 for those who will not be in Colorado Springs. You can watch it on CBS Sports Network tonight. And Utah State kind of in an interesting scheduling situation here where in back-to-back games playing against teams that really like to slow it down and have low-scoring outputs. But Air Force kind of in a different way than Fresno State does. But before we get into Air Force and the matchups tonight in that one, let's talk about that Fresno State win on New Year's Eve. And we'd wondered if the Aggies as a team under Ryan Odom could really function in a grinded-out, low-scoring affair, and they proved that they can.
Yeah, it was a little awkward because in the post-game press conference, Dan Akin brought up the tweet I had sent out. He didn't remember who he didn't know that it was me. But they brought up that tweet that I'd sent out saying Utah State was 0-15 in games where they'd scored 72 or fewer points so far under Ryan Odom. So they were aware of this fact. And mind you, I just wrote it off as this weird trend, sort of indicative of, yeah, this team likes to score more points, but so does everybody. So, like, teams that score fewer points, when teams score 7,200 points, they tend to lose. Ryan Odom had a losing record at UMBC when he scored 72 or fewer points. Utah State, over the last 10, 12 years before Odom, had a losing record worse than Ryan Odom's record when scoring 72 or fewer points. It's not weird that you lose when you do that. It was the fact they had never won.
It was a big goose egg.
Yeah, that was the weird trend about it. And it was maybe indicative of a little bit of, okay, this team, is it just a psychological thing? Because you couldn't tie it to any specific thing. Because, Utah State, there's plenty of times where Utah State holds its opponents to 60-ish points. They've done it several times this year. They held Fresno State 54, and, Seattle to 56. There's times where they can hold their opponents to low scoring. So, why can't they win just if they score fewer? What's the difference between, you beat Seattle 84-56? Would it be that, what if they just scored 70 in that game? Why would it matter they didn't reach 72 in that game? So it's just this really weird trend. Maybe they just feel sad when they aren't scoring that many points and don't play defense. That's basically the only explanation, is that if they're not scoring on offense, maybe they don't play as well on defense. I don't know. It was just a really weird trend. But they broke it.
Yeah, they proved that they
so
can.
They're now 1 in 15 when scoring 72 or fewer points. And we thought that this game might be like that because you mentioned Fresno State, they slow the game down. And they have ways to do that. And it was hard for Utah State to break out of that because the only way to break out of it was just to play absolutely suffocating defense for 40 minutes. Because if Fresno State scores, then they play this kind of soft full-court press where it's not really meant to cause turnovers. It's just meant to have you cross half court with like 22 seconds left.
Right, kill clock.
Yeah, so instead of a 30-second shot clock, you get 22 or 24. And that, over the course of the game, will knock 10, 12 possessions off the game. And if you're a team like Fresno State who's horrible at offense, that lowers the gap. You know, if you have a good offensive game, then it gets you a little closer to maybe having an upset.
And what we're seeing is in the trends so far on the year for Air Force is that they similarly like to kind of keep things in a lower kind of category. In some of the games that they have won, they've had some low-scoring games, 64, 59. Had some games where they've only scored 51. But they've also had some games where they've put up a fair amount of points, 79 against South Dakota, 80 against Arkansas State, 81 against Tarleton. But again, those aren't necessarily world-beater teams, but this is a team that can slow it down a little bit. And Air Force is coming into this one having lost 2 in a row. A loss against San Diego State, really kind of got blown out, and then they lose to Nevada, a little bit closer game, but still on a losing side there. Air Force coming in with a 2-game losing streak.
Yeah, Air Force, and they started the year, all of 9-4, which for a team that's been below 500 for the better part of, just about every year for the better part of a decade or more, starting 9-4 is pretty solid. But yeah, the 2 straight losses, one of those at home, to Nevada. It may be a bit of a rude awakening for them where they thought, okay, we're 9-4, but then you realize just how tough Mountain West play is. Obviously, San Diego State's a really good team, but Nevada, they're middle of the pack, and you lose at home to them. It's like, okay, Mountain West play might be tough. So Air Force is realizing that, but Air Force is still a very tough team to play on the road. They're a team that, like last year, Utah State played Air Force 3 times last year. Twice they beat them by 27 points, exactly 27 points both times. Once in the Spectrum and then in the conference tournament. When they went and played Air Force on the road, Utah State had one of its worst offensive performances of the last decade and a half. 47 points, single-digit three-point percentage.
It was bad.
Yeah, it was really bad. So, and sometimes you just have a night like that. Hopefully it won't happen again. This team's a little bit better shooting-wise. But obviously it took that much because they had one of the worst offensive performances, again, of a long time. And they only lost by 2. But then again, that's all it takes.
Yeah.
And in a slow-it-down game, Air Force was perfectly happy to play a game that's in the 40s or the 50s. Because then all it takes is just a bucket or 2. And any college basketball team worth their salt can get a bucket or 2.
So a couple interesting things about Air Force is that scoring offense, they average about 69 points a game. Not a lot. But one of the things that really kind of stands out is their 3-point percentage defense. They're ranked 14th in the country, only allowing about 27.6% percent from their opponents from 3. And that's certainly been one of Utah State's strengths. So the Aggie perimeter offense versus the Air Force perimeter defense. And that's really the strength of Air Force is in their guard play. They're not a big team. And so they have a lot of guys that they will play. And most of them are, 6'5" or less, 6'6" or less?
Yeah, their entire starting lineup is either 6'4" or 6'5". So on the low end, their shortest guy is 6'4", but their tallest guy is 6'5". So they had a 6'10" guy at the start of the year, but he got injured, so he's out. And I think they have one guy who comes off the bench is actually, at this point, a 3-time freshman player of the week, I don't know if I can say his name properly. Where is it? I'm looking at my preview. Rytis Petritis? I don't know if I'm saying that anywhere in the realm of being right. But he's like 6'7", I think. 6'7", 6'8". Very versatile player. He could be a huge key in this, especially against the Utah State team that's really tall. And you mentioned the Air Force being good at guarding, the perimeter. But with that height, Utah State really needs to take advantage of taking the ball to the rack. Sean Bairstow posting guys up. Dan Akin getting open. Getting into driving lanes, dump it off to Dan Akin. Akin just finishes it. When Doris is in for his 8 to 10-ish minutes, he's got to be able to finish. Like, dude, you're going to be half a foot taller than basically everyone you're going against. You got to be able to finish. And he's done better of late. He's performed much better last 5 or 6 games. So he can provide, 8 to 10 quality minutes and a few extra baskets. So it's going to be huge for Utah State to get inside. Because, they'll shoot decently from 3, I imagine. If Air Force does their best against Utah State, the Aggies could shoot in the mid-30s from 3, which could be enough still to beat Air Force if you're shooting well enough. But the key to making this game a comfortable win, it'll be a lot like, I think it was San Francisco, that was just selling out. Completely sold out and guarding the 3. And Utah State was just, forming a layup line inside. They're just dumping it off, and was Akin have his 19 or 21 points in that game or something like that? I think it was either that or Loyola. He led the team in scoring one of those games.
Yeah, against San Francisco it was Akin. Yeah, he had 19.
Yeah, so this could be another game where Dan Akin gets a lot of points because if Air Force is selling out on the perimeter, we've seen these Aggies say, all right, guard the 3 all you want. Layup is still the best shot in the game, and they're very willing to take it.
Yeah, besides Akin, Bairstow is attacking the rim. He's shown he could be a slasher. Funk can get to the rim. But Dorius, that's somebody he had a great tournament in Hawaii, a decent game against Fresno State, but certainly this is a matchup for him that he should be able to have a pretty solid night for the Aggies. And the other thing, too, is that Utah State will likely have a good number of second-chance opportunities because, as we've said, this Air Force team is not very big, and they don't get a lot of offensive rebounds, and they struggle with rebounding in general just because they're not quite the same size as their opponents. And this is an area where Utah State should be able to have several second-chance opportunities for them.
Yeah, especially you look at Dan Akin where in the last 3 games, in each of them, he's had at least 3 offensive rebounds. He attacks the offensive boards with a hustle that you just don't see from anyone ever. He's flying in there. All of a sudden, there goes an offensive rebound. All of a sudden, 7'1" Trevin Dorius comes flying into your field of vision. Like, where did he come from, and how did I miss that? This giant of a man flying for basketballs. It'd probably be terrifying if you're a 6'5" guy, and all of a sudden there's this 260-pound, 7'1" guy flying at you, going after the rebound. So, and again, Dorius he's not going to rack up 6, 7, 8, 9 offensive rebounds because again, he's only going to play, 8 to 10 minutes. So, but still, in each of those games against SMU and Washington State and Fresno State, when he's getting 3, 4 offensive rebounds, it has an impact. It gets you extra buckets. I think all 3 of his offensive rebounds against Fresno State resulted in points. And that's huge. Because, if you get 3 offensive rebounds, you get points on each of them, minimum 6 buckets or 6 points. 6 buckets. 6 points.
6 buckets, that'd be good.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot more points. 6 points, as many as 12 or 9 if all of them were 3s. And that makes a difference. 3 offensive rebounds can be the difference in a game.
Yeah, for Air Force, how well since they're a little bit smaller team, guard heavy, this is a team that can shoot the 3. They're about 36% from beyond the arc. So you're not too shabby. They're about ranked 70th in the country in 3-point percentage. But they average about 8.5 attempts per game. So they'll put it up. So that perimeter defense has to be on point for USU as well.
Yeah, and this is one of the areas where I think Utah State can have the most trouble, because they can have trouble guarding quick, smaller guards. Granted, these guys can have size and a bit of athleticism too. 6'4", 6'5" guys who can really move. And Utah State's had trouble with some of these guys. They've had some success, but over the last few games, we've seen them really struggle with athletic guards. And so unless their perimeter defense is really on, I think they could have trouble guarding Air Force at times, especially Jake Heidbreder. Again, I don't know if I can say their names.
Heidbreder?
Is that how you say it? Heidbreder? He's averaging around 15.5 points. And mind you, 15.5 points on a slow-paced team. His per 100 possessions, per possession scoring is closer to that of, Stephen Ashworth, who's averaging 17, 18 points a game. This is a guy who's scoring 15.5 on a team that does not play a lot of actual basketball when it's on the court. And he's very efficient. He's shooting over. He's close to having 50, 40, 90 splits. He's at 49, like a hair under 50% overall. He's at 40% from three, 41%, and he's at 88% on his free throws. This is a highly efficient basketball player, and that can be incredibly dangerous because if suddenly he's having a game where he averages like 9 attempts per game. But what if he goes, if you're playing in a game and he gets like 15, 16 attempts on this efficiency? You're looking like 20, 25-point game. And that can be incredibly dangerous, especially if this game gets slowed down the way Air Force wants, which it's probably going to dictate the pace. You can't force a team to play faster. It's very hard, again, unless you're just shutting them down on offense and you can get out and run. Then the slower team is going to dictate the pace because it's easier for them to do what they want to do than for a faster team to force them into playing quicker.
The other thing, this Air Force team, they play a lot of guys and use a lot of guys. So, as we said, Jake Heidbreder, he's averaging 15, 16 points a game, but they've got 3 other guys that are averaging about 9, almost 4, that are 8 or 9 points a game. So they have a lot of guys that they'll use, and they go deep. And there's a lot of guys that will get into the rotation. So it'll be an interesting matchup for Utah State, trying to avenge what happened to them last year in Colorado Springs. Again, pregame coverage at 6 with Al Lewis and Jalen Moore, and tip-off, that's on KVNU. And then the tip-off at 7, and you can watch the game on CBS Sports Network.
When it comes to home care, it's important to know you have a choice. If you or a loved one is in need of hospice or home health services, remember that Primrose Home Care and Hospice believes in treating the patient as well as the problem. We work directly with you and your doctor to create a health plan that's catered to your needs. Our team is devoted to providing options in the freedom and safety of your own home. Visit us at primrosecare.com or call to schedule a free consultation. Primrose Home Care and Hospice, your local hospice and home health provider since 2006.
As a small business, achieving your financial goals and ambitions can be a steep and rocky mountain to climb. This is Brett Green, president of Cache Valley Bank. To conquer this mountain and achieve your goals, it takes planning, hard work, and discipline. At Cache Valley Bank, we have the resources, expertise, and flexibility to help you scale your way to success. Give us a call. Let's work together and climb the mountains that await. Cache Valley Bank, member FDIC.
Northern Utah and Southern Idaho's home for sports. It's the Full Court Press on Sports Talk Radio, 106.9 FM, 1390 AM. The Fan.
Welcome back. Final segment of the Full Court Press. Unfortunately, had to cut a bit of that segment off that we recorded with me and Eric. I went too long reading some of you guys' texts coming in. Obviously, don't have an issue with that. Obviously, we always want you guys to text in. We have a couple more to get through. We got one from 4781. Briefly mentioned Donovan Mitchell scoring 71 points for the Cavs against the Bulls last night. That was one of just too many things that happened on Monday. 4781, he said, I don't care about Don 71. He's still going to be a bum in the playoffs. There was a mix of reactions from Utah fans. Some of them were we let this guy go. Some of them are people like me that are saying, yeah, Utah still made the right decision in moving him because we weren't going to get the Donovan Mitchell that's playing he's playing inspired basketball right now in Cleveland. He wasn't going to do that in Utah. Then there's some overlap between the people like me and I guess like 4781, where it's like I'm not necessarily salty about it. It's like, yeah, I think he's going to be good in Cleveland. I don't know if he's going to be a bum in the playoffs. He's never really been a bum in the playoffs. I think his last year in Utah, he wasn't the same. But this is a dude who is absolutely going off in the playoffs on a regular basis his first several years in Utah. When he's playing the inspired basketball that he was playing early in his career with Utah, where he's not as offensively developed as he is now, but he was playing really hard. He's going to do the same thing in Cleveland. I think he'll continue to have a good career, though I think it was a good thing for Utah to move him. But anyway, that'll do it for us here. Have a good one, guys.